Good morning, kiddos. Today we are going to talk about the circulatory system. 6.2. 6.2 is actually kind of a big unit, so we're going to split it up into 6 different parts: A, B, C, D, E, F, and we're going to do A, B, and C today. So 6.2a, the circulatory system. Make sure you're paying attention to the understandings and skills because they're not necessarily going to go in order, because it makes more sense to kind of group them by topic. So before we get too deep, just a quick refresher. The circulatory system is the organ system responsible for transporting oxygen and nutrients around the body, as well as removing waste from tissue and cells. So we talked about digestion last time, right? And that's how you get all those monomers. You eat your food, your stomach churns it up, your intestines break it down and absorb it even more. And then it's got to get transported, right? So your blood is really like the highway system transporting stuff all around. And then the heart, it's the central organ where blood is pumped, right? This is kind of the engine that keeps everything going. And if you're wondering what this stuff is right here, that yellow stuff, that's fat. And we'll talk about that later. Okay, so let's start with a little bit of history. William Harvey is credited with discovering blood circulation in the 1600s. Now, before that, we kind of had the weird idea that your organs consumed blood, like the way you consume food. We knew that it was in your body, but we thought that, I believe your liver produced it, and I think we thought that like the rest of your organs consumed it. And we didn't really have a good way to prove that that wasn't the case. But William Harvey didn't believe that. He didn't fall in line with the prevailing thought at the time. He thought, no, there's a way to look at this. So, using the experiment shown to the left, he was able to prove that blood flows in one direction. Now, it does flow in one direction in your blood vessels, but it also circulates all around your body. But basically, he kind of tied himself off, like he was going to shoot up, but didn't shoot up because we didn't have hypodermics then. And he could see that when you clenched, the arteries and veins would pop out. So what he was doing is he was shutting off blood supply here, right? So he was stopping or slowing the flow of blood here. And then when you clench your fist, you're activating those muscles and it causes blood to become more apparent in your veins. And so you can see there's like letters here: A, B, C, D, E. He also determined that blood flows with high pressure, so it must be recycled when traveling to the heart. And that's really the key. So the one way directional thing is not hugely astounding. It was the fact that it flows with high pressure. So it's got to be recycled when it's traveling to the heart. That's the key. And that's really what he's showing you here, is that when you put the blood vessels under pressure, right, you stop the flow, you clench your muscles, and then you pinch different points, right? So if you're pinching here and here, that means you're restricting blood flow here. That means you've got blood here and you've got blood here. It's not simply just being consumed. It's got to be, in order to maintain pressure, there's got to be something pushing the blood. And that pressure comes from the heart pushing blood around your body. Now, if your organs were just consuming blood, it would be a passive system, right? It would be from one end to the other. It would be consumed. There would not be a lot of pressure there. But because it's being circulated, your heart is the thing that's pushing it. And that push is part of what gives us our blood pressure. So here, you can see anybody that's got good looking veins in their arm. If you clench your fist, I can't see mine, but if you clench your fist, you can see. So, the thing you need to know about Harvey. He's the guy that is credited with discovering that your heart is the thing that pushes blood around your body, right? Your heart is the thing that's a pump, and that he's showing that blood flows in one direction in your blood vessels, right? So you have some blood vessels that are dedicated to carrying blood to the heart and some blood vessels that are dedicated to carrying blood away from the heart, right? It's a one-way flow within those vessels. And that blood pressure, right, is partially resultant from your heart acting as a pump. Okay. So for the rest of 6.2, we're going to talk about blood vessels, we'll talk about circulation, we'll talk about heart structure and function, we'll talk about heartbeat, how the heartbeat itself is initiated, the cardiac cycle, and heart rate. So blood vessels first, and this is a refresher from all the way back freshman year. So blood vessels are responsible for transporting blood and its contents throughout the circulatory system, and there's three major types. There's your arteries, there's your capillaries, and there's your veins, right? So arteries carry blood away from the heart, away. Veins carry blood to the heart. And then your capillaries are the smaller network, the very, very thin, one cell thick network that you actually see moving through tissues. And that's where a lot of the diffusion happens of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So, understanding number one, arteries convey blood at high pressure from the ventricles to the tissues of the body. So, arteries are blood vessels that carry oxygenated blood away from the heart to cells in the body. And blood leaves the heart through ventricles at high pressure. So, atrium's up top, ventricles at the bottom. And we'll talk more about this when we talk about the heart cycle. So, blood, as it's leaving the heart, it goes through the ventricles. So, bottom push up, bottom push up. That's how blood leaves the heart. But let's focus for now on the actual blood vessels themselves. So, the walls of the arteries contain thick muscle and elastic fibers. Most of the width, actually, is muscle. So, these elastic fibers recoil after each heart pump, which helps push blood forward. So, there's actual muscle tissue, right? Smooth muscle tissue that actually helps push blood through your arteries. And then branches off major arteries are called arterioles. Okay. Just like when we talked about the intestine, the space in the middle, if we're thinking about this like a tube or a straw, the space in the middle is called lumen. The inner layer of tissue is endothelium. Endo means in. Then you have the internal elastic lamina, right? That's this right here. And that's exactly what it sounds like. This is that elastic fibers, and these actually recoil and contract and help push blood forward. And then you've got a membrane that kind of holds everything together. And then you have smooth muscle, right? And that muscle also constricts and relaxes, and it can change, help modify blood pressure in that area. And then you have the external elastic lamina, so two layers of elastic, one internal, one external. Internal elastic lamina, external elastic lamina. And then you have the adventitia, which is just the outside. So these elastic lamina layers, the internal elastic lamina and the external elastic lamina, these actually contract and they help push blood forward after your heart pumps. And then you have the smooth muscle. Muscle fibers are able to contract and change the size of the lumen. And that allows your circulatory system to help control blood pressure. And that's important. So when you're exercising, right, you need that lumen, that space to be very, very big because you need to get as much blood as possible to different muscle groups, right? And then there are other times when you need that lumen to shrink and you want to restrict access. That's actually what shock is. You hear about people going into shock. Shock is when your blood pressure can decrease to dangerously low levels because your major arteries and everything constricts and you conserve blood flow. So your body conserves blood flow and it keeps blood flowing to only the essential organs to keeping you alive, and everything else kind of shuts down, which can be dangerous if you can't reverse it. And that has a lot to do with this muscle tissue, right? Your brain kicks into overdrive, and kind of takes control of things, and these kind of relax and your body literally redistributes blood and where it goes. And your body couldn't do that if you didn't have this muscular tissue inside the artery walls. Both the fiber types, whether you're talking about the lamina, which is the elastic part, the inner or the outer, or the muscle, is they're considered, they make the arteries tough, right? Allowing them to withstand lots of high pressure. So think of your garden hose, right? The actual garden hose material is usually pretty thick, and that's to allow high pressure. Now, if you get like a bubble in your hose because you're kinking the hose too much, it's going to burst. You don't want that to happen to your arteries. So all this extra layers of tissue helps prevent getting bubbles and pops. Now, they do happen sometimes. That's what an aneurysm is. So when you get a bubble or a weak spot in a wall that is threatening to rupture, that's an aneurysm. So you hear about people having brain aneurysms. That's usually because there's an artery in their brain, right, that has a weak spot in a wall, which can be very dangerous to get to. So when you hear aneurysm, that's a weakened portion. So part of the muscle tissue in the laminas have broken down or they've been stretched because of usually high pressure. You get a weak spot, and if that weak spot ruptures, that's an aneurysm. Okay, artery constriction. So this is kind of what I'm talking about. So arteries can actually change the diameter of the lumen. So dilated means open, right? Lots of flow. A normal artery is kind of like in between. And then if you have a constricted artery, that's what it looks like. So if you've ever used Visine, Visine is a vasodilator, meaning it opens up. Is it a vasodilator or a vasorestrictor? It's a vasodilator. So you put it in your eyes and then it relaxes those arteries, which lets the blood flow out so your eyes don't look red anymore. You can't see the veins or the arteries in your eye anymore. Right? So Visine, vasodilator, it opens stuff up. Then you have other things like caffeine. Caffeine is a vasoconstrictor. It actually causes us to constrict, right? It reduces blood flow, also increases blood pressure and heart rate. Oh, U2 and U3. So arteries have muscle cells and elastic fibers in their walls. That's why arteries are awesome. And these muscles and elastic fibers assist in maintaining blood pressure between pump cycles. So your heart pumps, ba-boom, and then there's like a pause, right? And then it pumps again, ba-boom. And it's the muscle and the elastic fibers that keep your blood pressure up while blood's flowing through your body, right? Otherwise, it would just be like pressure, no pressure, pressure, no pressure. And that would be great. Okay, understanding number 4. Blood flows through capillaries. Capillaries have permeable walls that allow exchange of materials between cells in the tissue and the blood in the capillary. Okay. So arteries carry blood through the body. They branch into arterioles, which further branch and eventually become capillaries. So here's your artery. It's carrying blood away from the heart, and it's delivering it to this tissue. Now, I don't know what this tissue is, but you can see there's a whole bunch of cells here, and these guys need oxygen, right? So your artery is going to branch. Now, that branch is called an arteriole. Here are these lymphatic vessels. We talked about lymphatic vessels when we talked about the digestive system too. They're pretty much all over your body. So these arterioles are going to branch, and eventually they're going to get to the really, really thin parts of the capillaries. And this is where diffusion happens. So because of concentration gradients, right, you've got a high concentration of oxygen in the blood and you've got a low concentration in the cells. Oxygen is going to diffuse out. Meanwhile, you have a high concentration of carbon dioxide in the cells. It's going to diffuse into the blood, right? And it's going to continue getting pumped. Well, it's going to continue back into the veins in this way. Your capillaries can be as thin as like one cell thick all the way around. Think like thinner than your hair. Here we go. Capillaries are the smallest blood vessels, and they form a network throughout almost all the tissues in your entire body. And they are really like the side roads. So if you think of your circulatory system as like a road system or a highway system, these are your residential side streets, right? Capillaries would be like your neighborhoods. Here you go. The walls of capillaries are one cell thick, and there's pores between them. And as a result, the walls are permeable and substances can pass through pretty easily. So you've got lots of diffusion. And really, these capillaries are like just wide enough for like a single layer or a single marching order of blood cells can come through, so one at a time. And you'll see the word erythrocyte used, and that's just a red blood cell. And here, just like we had in our arteries, you have endothelium. That's the inner layer, endothelium, right? And you can see this endothelium is just like one cell thick. It's a mosaic of cells. And then you have what's called the basal lamina, and lamina is just like outer coating. And we say basal because it's the bottom. It's not really the bottom, it's just the outer covering. And then here we have a pericyte, which is not parasite, like not parasite, pericyte. And that would be where a pore is. And that diffusion is going to happen through here and through here. Here we go. So the walls of capillaries are one cell thick with pores between. Yeah, I just said all that stuff. Okay. So here we have, like I said, these capillaries are so thin, there's like room for one red blood cell to come through at a time. And this is where that concentration gradient really comes into play. So you have oxygen, highly oxygenated blood, and the body cells here, they need oxygen, right? So their concentration is less. That oxygen is going to diffuse in, right? Now that blood cell or this blood has a low concentration of carbon dioxide, so carbon dioxide is going to diffuse in wastes. Now, nutrients and waste, some of it's diffusion, some of it's transport, but for the most part, it's diffusion. So delivery, pickup, and out. You can think of it as like delivery service. I was going to say Amazon Prime, but you don't ever give stuff to Amazon Prime. At least I don't. Okay. We're talking about veins now? Yeah, we're talking about veins. Understanding number 5, veins. So we're switching away from arteries now, away from capillaries. We're talking about veins. Veins collect blood at low pressure, right? So no longer do we have the high, intense pressure of the arteries. We have low pressure. So after leaving capillaries, veins transport blood back to the heart at low pressure. And you can see it looks like it's the same, but it's not. And we'll compare the two in a few minutes. They have the same parts. So there's a lumen, but now you have a valve. You have the endothelium, which is that inner layer of tissue. You've got a basement membrane, or you can call that the basal lamina. It's the same thing. And then you still have that smooth muscle, right? And then you have the adventitia. And then branches that come off the vein are called venules. So blood flow through veins is at a much lower pressure. And because of that, well, I shouldn't say because of that. So veins have thinner walls and a larger lumen. It's actually the other way around. Because veins have much thinner walls and a larger lumen, that is the cause for blood flow to be passive. The muscle layer is not very thick. You notice there's none of that elastic lamina in here, and that's really the key. So your veins don't constrict and dilate. They don't have active control like your arteries do, and that's because they don't have that elastic fiber. They do have some muscle, but that's more just static muscle. It doesn't like change the diameter of the lumen at all. So you've got the outside wall, you've got a very thin layer. It says elastic fibers, but it's not like the other elastic laminas. You've got the endothelium, which is that inner surface, and you've got that large lumen. So veins are not active. They don't have active pressure control like arteries do. And you can see here, there's no elastic lamina in the diagram here. I don't know why it says. There are some like elastic fibers, but it's not the same. It's like elastic to make your veins stretchy, not active control to maintain pressure. But valves are really important, right? So understanding number 6, valves in veins and in the heart ensure the circulation of blood flow by preventing backflow. So don't worry about the heart valves. We'll deal with that later. But in your veins, right, these valves are here to keep blood from flowing backwards. Because remember, your heart is in the upper third of your body. So that means veins, even though they don't have like the musculature that arteries do, they somehow have to get blood up to your heart against gravity. And that's kind of a feat considering that, you know, they're not active like arteries are. So they have to get blood up back to the heart at low pressure without active muscle constriction. And they do that by using these veins. So here's a sideways picture. So blood, when your heart pumps, blood is pushed forward. And when your heart relaxes, the valves close and blood can't go back the other way. So this is a side to side picture. But now if you were to look at that up and down, right? So here it is. So your heart, when your heart pumps and squeezes, pressure increases a little bit, enough to push blood forward, right? And then when your heart relaxes, pressure drops, because remember, this is passive now, and these valves close, and then the blood can't go back down. So they're like little gates that every time your heart pumps, they open and blood can go forward, and every time your heart relaxes, they stop and blood can't go back. And it's like a step ladder up, 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 all the way back up to your heart. So veins contain valves which prevent low pressure blood from flowing backwards. Flow forward opens the valve, and flaps allow free flow. So as your blood is, you've got a little bit, when we're talking about high and low pressure here, we're talking about like a very small change in the gradient. It's not like in your arteries. So as blood pushes forward, it opens. It's like push to open door, right? But then you can't go back the other way. Backward flow closes the valve flaps and it prevents flow backwards, right? So push to open door this way, and the door doesn't open that way. Okay, here we go. Now you can see a picture of both an artery and a vein next to each other. So you can see that the artery has much more layers, many more layers, and they tend to be a lot thicker. So here you have that tunica media, or the smooth muscle, right? On the artery, it's much thicker. See how thick that is? And then on the vein, it's much thinner. Now, this is actually helping control and push blood forward, and not so much over here, okay? You have the endothelium, which is the inner layer. You have the subendothelial layer. Don't worry about that. The internal elastic membrane. See, look, you've got 2 layers of elastic membrane. Here's the internal layer and the external layer. You do not have those over here. There's no elastic layers to help push that blood forward in your veins. And that's pretty much the things you should probably focus on, is the fact that arteries have this internal elastic membrane and they have the external elastic membrane, right? That help push blood forward. And you've got this much thicker tunica media over here. So for your arteries, things you should know, those internal and external elastic membranes and that smooth muscle help actively push blood forward by modifying pressure in the arteries, whereas veins, it's a little bit different. The tunica media is much thinner, right? So it's not active. You do not have those elastic layers. So you don't have active control. So no active control. But veins do have these valves, and these prevent backflow. Okay, so high pressure, and active control over blood flow, usually by changing the diameter of the lumen. So when I say active control, I mean active control over the size of the lumen, right? So your arteries can dilate or expand or constrict and change blood pressure and blood flow by changing the diameter of the lumen, and it is the elastic membrane, the tunica media, the muscle, and the other elastic membrane that really help modify that. Whereas in veins, it's low pressure. You have no active control over the diameter of the lumen, and the lumen tends to be very large, right? Usually. Large lumen, no active control over the lumen's diameter, but you have valves to prevent backflow. Okay. And then you have your capillaries down here, and we talked about that. Oop. Okay, so at this point, you should be able to identify blood vessels as arteries, capillaries, or veins from the structure of their walls, right? So make sure you have some sort of comparison chart in your notes because you absolutely will have to look at some pictures and identify what's going on, okay? Here we have a capillary. You can tell it's a capillary. It's just a single layer of cells. There's not layers of stuff here. Here you have an artery, and you can tell it's an artery because you've got this thick layer, the tunica media, that thick layer of muscle that can help control lumen diameter. And then here you have a vein where you've got a lumen that's much bigger, right? And you don't have that thick wall. This wall is pretty thin, so you don't have that control. Okay. So if I gave you like these three pictures on a test, you should be able to tell me which one's an artery, which one's a vein, and which one's a capillary. Yep. Okay, we said that. Arteries, thick walls, veins, thin walls. Capillaries, one cell thin. And one more time, in case you needed yet another diagram. Also, you can see, actually, here's a microgram, so you can see what they actually look like in the body. So when we're talking about like changes in lumen diameter, we mean it, and the cell on the layer of the thickness, right? So here's an artery. You can tell that's got a very thick muscle wall, and there's the lumen, right? Much smaller, and then your veins, like a giant garden hose, right? And you can see those walls are very, very thin. Okay, C. We're up to C already, circulation, right? Because we're only doing A, B, and C today. I don't know why we can't see that. That's all right. So let's go all the way back to freshman year and review just a little bit before we get started. So freshman year, if I taught you guys, or Everhart taught you, that there are two types of circulation. There's pulmonary circulation and there's systemic circulation. Now, when you look at this diagram, please, 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 please do not think that veins only exist on the left side of your body and that arteries only exist on the right side of your body. That is not what we're talking about. This is a simplified diagram to show you how stuff works. In reality, you have both veins and arteries on both sides of your body. Okay? Okay. So we're using this to talk about the difference between pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. So pulmonary means lung, right? So pulmonary, oh, that's red and you can't see it. How do I change my color? Pulmonary means lung. Pulmonary circulation carries oxygen poor, CO2 rich blood from the heart to the lungs and back to the heart. Systemic carries oxygen rich blood to the body and returns carbon dioxide rich blood to the heart. So systemic is body. So basically, blood has to make two trips to the heart on its circuit around the body. Heart, lungs, heart, body. Heart, lungs, heart, body. Okay? So, blood vessels in the lungs, right? Here's your heart. Pulmonary arteries. Why is this all messed up? Sorry, this is going to bug me. I have to fix it. Okay. So, pulmonary arteries. Pulmonary arteries. Arteries are not red. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. So, here's the heart. Pulmonary arteries are carrying blood away from the heart to the lungs. Pulmonary veins carrying blood from the lungs to the heart. Okay? So don't let the color red or blue tell you if it's a vein or artery, because if you're talking about pulmonary circulation, arteries away from the heart. right? So this is deoxygenated blood that's returning from the body. It goes to the heart. It needs a push to go to the lungs. Here it picks up its oxygen, and now it's going to be carried through veins. Veins go to the heart, back to the heart, and then down to the body. Okay? And then you have systemic veins and you have systemic arteries, right? So again, veins to the heart, arteries away from the heart. And then capillaries throughout your entire body. The pulmonary circuit is just the circuit between the heart and the lungs. So I'm a blood cell. I just got back from the body. I need to drop off this carbon dioxide. The heart is going to push me to the lungs. I'm going to drop off my carbon dioxide. I'm going to pick up my oxygen. And before I can like go to the brain or wherever else I need in the body, I have to go back to the heart. And then the heart pushes me out and sends me where I need to go. Okay, so your heart is really the central hub. Systemic circulation is the bottom portion. So after you've picked up your oxygen from the lungs, now you can go deliver your oxygen to wherever it needs to go in the body, and then you come back to the heart, right? So heart, lungs, heart, body. Heart, lungs, heart, body. It's a big figure 8. Oh, I even have it animated. Check it out. Ready? Heart, body, back to the heart, and then back to the lungs. Yeah, big figure 8. And if you needed a ridiculously more complicated diagram, there is one here. This is understanding number 7. There's separate circulation for lungs and for the body. Now, I think somewhere in your skills and understandings and all that stuff, there's an objective where you have to compare this to like other things. So not all organisms have this kind of figure 8 circulation. There are other organisms like fish that have just like one way, single circuit instead of double circuit. And it has to do with the structure and function of the heart. You may have to look up a couple examples. I don't think I have the fish slide in here. Okay, so let's talk about circulation in the lungs. So overall, there are 2 separate circulations in humans. We talked about that. There's systemic, which is between the heart and the body. And then there's pulmonary, which is heart and the lungs. One of the key differences, so this is new information that you didn't have to know as a freshman, but you do have to know now. So capillaries in the lung can't withstand high pressure because remember, they're only like 1 cell thick, right? So they can't handle receiving blood at a high pressure because remember, it's also pretty close to the heart, right? So these arteries here are pushing blood out that's got to go to like the rest of your body. So that's got to be super high pressure because it's got a long way to go. That kind of pressure would burst these blood vessels. So instead, capillaries in the lungs receive blood from veins, ventricles, the ventricles. So remember, because this is low pressure. So your lungs receive blood from the heart at low pressure so that these capillaries don't burst. And they do that through this, remember, atriums are on top, ventricle, the bottom portions of the heart, ventricles on the bottom. So here you have this vena, I think that's the vena cava. Nope, this is the vena cava. We'll talk about that later. But this here, ventricle, it's pushing blood out. You can see a big valve here. And this is low pressure into the lungs. And then you've got diffusion where it's delivering that carbon dioxide and picking up oxygen. And then it comes back and it's going to come back into the heart. So lung receives blood at low pressure. Otherwise, all these tiny little capillaries and the alveoli in your lungs would actually burst, and that would be a bad deal. Oh, check it out. So how long does it take blood to make an entire circuit through the body? Well, we can figure it out here. I'm going to go back and start it over. Ready? So down to the foot, it's delivering its oxygen, picking up carbon dioxide, and it's going back up to the heart. The heart's going to push it to the lungs. Now it's going to drop off the carbon dioxide, pick up oxygen in the lungs, come back to the heart, and back down. So that took what, like 2 minutes? No. Did it start over? We'll have to wait till it starts over. I was like watching the actual red blood cell. I didn't count. Down, up. Pick up. Okay, so like 15 seconds, really. 19 seconds? We'll call it 19 seconds. So 19 seconds for a red blood cell to make it all the way through that cycle, that figure 8. That's pretty fast. And you got to think that's happening all over your body all the time. That's amazing. This is why traffic jams in your circulatory system become such a big deal. So there's a couple of different health issues that we should talk about that deal with the circulatory system, right? So application number 3, causes and consequences of occlusion. Occlusion means blockage. Why is that red again? Occlusion means blockage. Of the coronary arteries. Okay, so first we need to know what the coronary arteries are. Coronary means heart, right? So coronary arteries are going to be the actual arteries that deliver blood to the muscle fibers of your heart. So not part of the circuit system that delivers blood to the rest of your body, because your heart is a muscle, right? It needs oxygen too. So coronary arteries, they're on the outside of the heart. Those are the blood vessels that you see along the outside of the heart. When those get blocked, right, because you've got lipids that are building up inside that and they're restricting the lumen, causing high pressure, and you're not delivering as much oxygen to the heart as you need, that can actually cause a heart attack. So atherosclerosis is a common health issue that occurs when fatty tissues or fatty deposits develop in artery walls and muscle cells form a cap over them, right? Because remember, the job of your artery is to like push blood, so it needs control. So what happens is if these fat deposits are here for a long period of time, your body actually grows a layer of muscle tissue over the top. And that's not good because now you have effectively like restricted the diameter here, right? You need this diameter to deliver as much blood as possible to the heart to keep it pumping. But now you've restricted that access. And so everybody's walked through the hallways when classes are changing, right? That's not a good thing. If you made the hallways even smaller, you're going to restrict access. That reduces the size of the lumen and it impedes your blood flow. And atherosclerosis usually doesn't affect health until you have a major artery blockage, and that can cause a heart attack. So here you've got blood flow. You can see buildup of some lipids and fats is going to change that flow. Buildup more is going to restrict that flow. Eventually, if this deposit gets big enough, you're actually going to restrict flow altogether, and that's when you have like a heart attack. And the reason you have a heart attack is because oxygen doesn't get to those muscles in the heart in time, and those muscles in that muscle tissue in the heart actually dies. So you'll have like stripes of tissue in the heart where the muscle fibers actually die and they don't work anymore. That's a heart attack. Now, if you have a coronary occlusion, that's these outer arteries. So these are the arteries that are responsible for delivering oxygen to the heart, right? You can see because they're on the outside of the heart. When that buildup happens in here, then you get heart pain, you get increased heartbeat, and you get pretty significant problems if that blood vessel actually breaks. So that's a coronary occlusion. And you can see, so if this is a cross section of this particular artery, right? So if we took this chunk out and slice it sideways, you can see all that lipid buildup in here. Okay, so you should be able to do all this stuff at this point, just for a check for understanding. And I'm gonna pause the lecture here for today. You should make sure that you can answer all the objectives in your notes, and let's see what those are. Right, we're not doing heart structure today. Okay. So let's see. We are in topic 6. So you'll see the Edpuzzle thing right here, and then I'll attach a video right there. Come on. I want to open this thing. So we talked about U1 today, we talked about U2, we talked about U3, we talked about U4, we talked about U5, U6, U7. Okay, so U1 through U7 you can complete today. In your notes, you can also talk about A1 and A2 in your notes. So U1 through U7, A1 and A2, you should have those completed in your notes for today. Make sure you're doing a good job on your notes because the tests are going to be open notes and these tests are like no joke. The topic 6 test is probably one of the hardest. So make sure you're taking really good notes. And then there was something else I was going to show you. Oh, let's see who turned in their, do I need to reopen the IA stuff? So remember your IA proposal was due on the 27th. I think I extended the deadline to last night. I haven't graded it yet. So I can't see. I don't want to show the, oh, 17. Okay, so now I can see. 17 out of like 20 something. That's not so great. Yeah, so that's 17. I have at least 25 kids in the class. So that's not good. That means I need to open that up. All right, so what that means is that I'm going to open that up right now. You're going to watch me do it. And if you have absolutely not turned in your proposal, I want you to do that like now because I need to read these and give you some feedback so you can get started. All right, so I had it open today till midnight. You know what? I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it open till today to midnight. If it's not in by midnight tonight, I'm going to start docking points because I need you to finish that. So let's change this. So there you go. If you have not done your IA proposal, please make sure you do it as soon as you're done with this lecture. Okay? Alrighty, so next rotation, we're going to do the rest of lecture for 2.6, and I will be here live to talk with you about your proposals. We'll Zoom live on Thursday. And again, if you need help with something, let me know. Okay? And as always, miss you guys. Yeah.